make sure you think your way through it a little bit.
Hi, I'm Jackie Reid and welcome to Lethal's Last Word. We've got a couple of big games to preview this weekend, and first up we'll be looking at the Saturday afternoon encounter in Adelaide. Flag favourites Hawthorn travel to Amy Stadium to take on Port Adelaide, and Leigh, the Power have been very hard to beat at home this season.
Well, they've been giant killers at home at Amy Stadium. We only have to have a look at their recent form. I mean, they started the season really well. Then all of a sudden we thought maybe they were flattening out. But then the recent form. They're 8-6 now. That 12's the magical number to play finals. They were pretty good against Essendon last week. Bad kicking in the last quarter may well have cost them the game. But of course, the weeks before that beat Collingwood. And so now they take on Hawthorn. Well, Geelong beat Hawthorn again last week, of course. That's only the only team to have beaten Hawthorn, and they just are able to shut down Hawthorn most of the time. That's the thing that Geelong do. Can Port do it this week?
Well, let's take a look at one of your key indicators for this match, and we want to see the areas the Cats were able to get on top of Hawthorn last week, particularly in that first half, and what the Power can learn from that.
Well, I think the thing that Geelong really do well against Hawthorn is their defence just overwhelms the Hawthorn forward line. So you've got to kick the ball well, and you see that particular stat in the first half when Geelong got away to the 3-goal lead. Hawthorn's kicking efficiency down at 49%. Now that's almost as low as Hawthorn have been for about 20 years since these stats have been made. But Hawthorn, I don't think the Port defence is as good as Geelong, but nevertheless the Hawthorn's ability to pinpoint their forwards and not just kick the ball wildly into their forward 50, because the ball will just come bouncing back. So certainly that is something that Port have to generate, the same pressure on the Hawthorn ball carrier to make them just kick the ball quickly, and then their defence have got a chance to cut it off.
Well, the Hawks are ranked third in the league for effective disposals and rely heavily on their great foot skills. Is there anyone that Port needs to keep a handle on this weekend?
Well, it's amazing. Brad Sewell's out of the team. You've got Mitchell is obviously always the main ball user in close. Isaac Smith is one of their lesser lights, but he's a player that opposition players often tag because he's the ball carrier. I mean, often I think in modern footy, it's the guy who can carry the ball into space you try to shut down. So he maybe will be someone that Port will be heading Kane Corns to, but I reckon Kane Corns, main tagger, he'll probably go to Sam Mitchell, I reckon.
Well, let's take a look at your key indicator for Port Adelaide in this game. The Power have taken a big leap in the defensive side of their game this season.
Well, it's amazing, yeah. To play well, you've got to defend well, and the difference between the Port Adelaide 2012, who were a struggling team, to the team this year that's won 8 games, their tackling efficiency, I think that's the main one. That's always a good indicator of effort and intensity, and that the 2 wins, particularly over Collingwood and the Swans in recent weeks, their intensity at the ball and their tackling pressure has been outstanding. It has to be that way again this week.
Well, let's have a look at an informed Port Adelaide midfielder that you've identified as the key player in this match. In the Power's 4 games since the bye, Brad Ebert has averaged over 30 disposals and 8 inside 50s per game.
And he's the one who tends to carry the ball into space. I mean, Boak and Hartlett, they're really good, strong midfielders. Kane Corns gets a lot of the ball as the tagger, but it seems to me that Ebert is their best running midfielder. And he will obviously, this is the kind of overlap running that he will do. He takes the ball off half-back, gets through the middle of the ground, and he's an Adelaide boy, back playing for Port after being drafted to the Eagles. So he's a second year back at Port, but seems much more comfortable, looks fit, strong, playing really well.
Do you think that the Hawks need to send someone to him, or is there someone else that they're likely to tag?
I don't think he'll be the first guy tagged. I would have thought maybe a Hartlett. He's a great user of the footy. I would have thought he's the Hawthorn's first tag. But Brad Sewell's out of the team, and Brad Sewell is often the player who gets that kind of midfield job. But Hawthorn don't really tend to play tight in the midfield. They tend to make their midfield against the opposition. It's not so much a one-on-one.
OK, Leigh, last word. Who's going to win this one?
Oh, I can't tip against Hawthorn, and maybe unless they play Geelong, but Port have been terrific. But Port have to be unbelievable, I think, to beat Hawthorn tomorrow, so I'm going to stick with the Hawks.
OK, that's Lethal's last word on the big clash between the Power and the Hawks. To what is always a highly entertaining and hotly contested match, it's the West Australian Derby between West Coast and Fremantle, Sunday afternoon at Patterson Stadium. And Leigh, these two sides always seem to produce a fantastic game.
Well, always such a big game because the 2-team town. Normally it's the little brother Fremantle who are the outsider, but this year Fremantle are going better than the big brother, the Eagles.
Well, Fremantle has clearly been the more impressive side over the course of the season, but let's take a look at the recent form of these two sides.
Well, we see where they are. West Coast are really fighting for that 12 wins for the final spot. The Dockers, they're hoping, still got aspirations for top four. The Eagles have been up and down. They got home against Adelaide last week in Adelaide. That was a good win. Just slight losses to Essendon and Hawthorn. Certainly St Kilda on top of the Dockers early, but eventually when the Dockers really got the intensity they needed in the game, they ended up winning. So they're in really good form.
Well, let's move on to the key indicator for this match, and it's the Eagles' ability to run and find space, particularly from their outside midfielders. So let's take a look at how the Dockers were able to restrict that when the sides met in round one.
Well, that is what Fremantle are so good. It's that bottom stat there in the bottom right-hand corner, inside 50s, only 38 last time they played the Eagles, but just the ability of the Dockers to strangle the opposition, to get the ball into their own forward line, lock it in, but then just deny the opposition scoring opportunities. So for the Eagles to be able to break Fremantle down, they've got to be able to run and carry the ball through the middle of the field. Always a tough ask against the Dockers.
Does that make Andrew Gaff an even more vital player for the Eagles without Luke Shuey and Scott Selwood?
Well, absolutely. But Scott Selwood normally takes a tagging role, so he's not there. But he's been a ball winner. Certainly Luke Shuey's a ball carrier. So Andrew Gaff is so often the recipient of the opposition close tagging tag because he can run and carry, takes the ball into space. Ryan Crowley is a player who mainly does that tagging. I wouldn't be surprised this week if someone like Stephen Hill. Now, Stephen Hill got tagged out of the game last week against St Kilda by Clint Jones. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ross Lyon says, well, Gaff is their main running ball carrier. That's what Hill can do for Fremantle. So maybe to give him the job, and maybe it's good training for down the track when if Hill has been tagged out of the game, you can give him another function to go and play on an opposition player.
Well, let's move on to a real key player for West Coast, and it's star forward Josh Kennedy. Luke McFarlane's not playing, so who goes to him?
Well, absolutely. I mean, lucky they've got Zach Dawson. He's been a great journeyman player, Zach Dawson, for both St Kilda and now at the Dockers. He's almost the most consistent. He's 45 goals, leading the goal kicking, but I don't know, that's low goals for the big forwards these days, but he's a great moving player. I mean, this is indicative, not only a player who can move the ball, that pick up and then that left foot goal that won them the game against the Crows last week. Josh Kennedy, he's a really, really high quality big forward. So I reckon Zach Dawson probably is the one who's going to get the matchup. It'll be a really important job to shut him down.
Well, let's take a look at Fremantle's key players. You've got Walters and Ballantyne.
Well, the ability of these two players to be goal kickers and to lock the ball in the forward line is terrific. They've got Pavlich back in the team all of a sudden now, the last week, and Sandilands, who gives them height in there. But they're both really dangerous players. They both get up into the middle of the ground. They'll get the ball in the back half and then take it forward, and they're chasing and tackling pressure. So I love Ballantyne. He just plays with enormous spunk and heart. Walters has got the speed. I mean, they really are two very dangerous. I reckon pairs, a good pair of small forwards who, one, can finish like they both can and can chase, tackle and pressure is a really valuable asset, and that's what the Dockers have got in these two.
Will someone like Darren Glass go to one of them?
Well, he might. I saw Darren Glass play on Lindsay Thomas a month or so ago against the Kangaroos. So Darren Glass often takes the small player, not so much the taller players in the way the Eagles set up their defence. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Glass ends up on Ballantyne. Not so much Walters, but maybe Ballantyne.
OK, last word. Can the Eagles win this one, or will Fremantle solidify that top four spot?
I think Fremantle will solidify that top four spot. I think they will beat the Eagles. I think they're going in better form. Always worries me when good players like Pavlich and Sandilands are second up after a long absence. Sometimes the first week just really debilitates their energy levels a little, but I'm going for the Dockers.
If the Eagles do lose this one, is it goodbye finals?
Well, not goodbye, but it makes it hard. I mean, they need to win, at the moment, they need to win probably 5 out of 8. It gets down to 5 out of 7 to have any chance of getting to that 12 win. So, no, not out of the question. They can still make finals, but they need to get home, I think.
Well, let's take a look at the rest of your tips for round 16, beginning with the Pies versus the Crows.
Yeah, Pies should win. I'm thinking they're probably an 8 out of 10 at this point in time against the Crows. Hawthorn, I reckon Hawthorn are about a 7 out of 10 in Adelaide still against Port. Geelong at Skilled Stadium, Simmons Stadium against Melbourne, that's about a 10 out of 10 the way I look at it. Richmond and the Suns in Cairns. I still think Richmond are probably a 6 out of 10 to beat the Suns up there. Carlton, St Kilda, it's hard to get a handle on these two teams right at the moment. I'm still going to stick to Carlton, maybe a 6 out of 10 there. Lions at home against the Kangaroos. I'm going to stick to the Kangaroos, but I think only just a 6 out of 10 chance for me for the Kangaroos. Certainly the Swans, that's almost a 10 out of 10 against the Giants these days. Eston, well, they're going to beat the Bulldogs about 10 out of 10, I reckon. And with the Dockers, I reckon maybe about a 6 out of 10 at this point of the season.
Well, thanks, Leigh. That's it for Lethal's Last Word. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.